Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. Covert Action Magazine is proud to support tonight's program that features four CIA and FBI alumni and whistleblowers who each have a great reputation as truth tellers and patriots who have called out wrongdoing and want to restore greater transparency and public accountability to U.S. police and intelligence agencies. And this is very much in the spirit of Covert Action Magazine, which was founded in 1977 by CIA whistleblower Philip Agee, who wrote the 1975 expose Inside the Company, a CIA diary. Since that time, the magazine has been devoted to exposing the abuses of U.S. intelligence agencies and has evolved to provide critical coverage of U.S. foreign policy more broadly, as well as some domestic issues. Besides Agee, additional founders of the magazine included Bill Schaap, Ellen Ray, and Lewis Wolf, who is still going strong in his 80s and is instrumental to running the magazine today. Many in the audience will agree with me when I say that Covert Action Magazine is needed now more than ever, and we would appreciate your spreading the word about our magazine and helping us out in any way that you can, whether financially or in broadening our investigative capabilities and coverage. You can donate or become a subscriber for just $25 a year by going to our website and clicking on the donation or subscription button. Covert Action Magazine was founded at a time when the public in the 1970s was deeply horrified to learn about what the CIA had been doing with American taxpayer dollars. It coincided with the publication, Agee's book coincided, and founding of the magazine coincided with the 1975 and 76 Church Committee hearings, which exposed CIA involvement in nefarious mind control experiments, political assassination, coup plots, and other skullduggery around the world, along with the FBI's involvement in a program of illegal surveillance and terrorism known as COINTELPRO. Jimmy Carter responded, and this was discussed in a recent article I did about Jimmy Carter. It was, of course, ignored in the media tributes to him. Now, Carter responded to the Church Committee by purging 800 CIA black operations specialists. However, his CIA director, Stansfield Turner, appointed Cold War hardliner Frank Carlucci as his deputy, began reinvigorating covert action operation behind the Iron Curtain and in Central America, setting the groundwork for Reagan as part of a revitalized Cold War, and struck back further by moving Congress to pass new legislation, making it more difficult to leak information about the agency and to criminalize agency whistleblowers. In the 1980s, 1990s, and early 2000s, despite Iran-Contra and other scandals, the public image of the CIA was gradually rehabilitated from the 70s through Hollywood films, with the CIA cleverly setting up its own liaison office to vet Hollywood films. And Covert Action has done an article about this, so you can look that up. By the mid 2000s, however, the public again had begun to lose trust in the CIA and FBI, with revelations about support for torture, planting agents provocateurs in right-wing groups to stir up violence, like the Michigan bombers plot on January 6th, and FBI and CIA involvement in the Russiagate hoax, which has underlain a new Cold War, which is very destructive. Our four speakers tonight have been at the forefront in the last generation in exposing before the public the machinations of the FBI and CIA and their involvement often in illegal activity, as well as their manipulation of public opinion. The focus of tonight's panel is on Donald Trump and what we can expect from his administration with regards to the FBI and CIA. To briefly give my point of view, and again, yeah, my name is Jeremy Kuzmarov. I'm the managing editor of Covert Action Magazine today, and we try and cover these issues carefully. From my point of view, my assessment, and we may have different viewpoints here tonight, Trump is a more savvy politician than he's often given credit for. More so than most, he and his handlers recognized the deep suspicion that had developed in the United States for the CIA and FBI, or so-called deep state, and he skillfully presented himself as an alleged victim uh, of their depredations, which he tried to associate with the Democratic Party that had come to champion the FBI and CIA. The Democrats assisted Trump immeasurably through their advancement of the Russiagate hoax, by which Trump was accused falsely of being a Russian agent. Though the Mueller report may have indeed exonerated him, Trump is ultimately, in my assessment, a creation of the very deep state that he claims to want to take down. Philip Agee's core insight was that U.S. intelligence agencies did the dirty work of the country's financial oligarchy. And Trump is a manifestation of that oligarchy, a billionaire who cut corporate tax rates during his presidency and made it easier for the rich to offshore their wealth, and a president who ramped up military spending and increased the budget for U.S. intelligence agencies by $9 billion. This when his predecessor, Barack Obama, gave the CIA everything it wanted, according to CIA Director Leon Panetta. The head of the CIA during Trump's first term, Mike Pompeo, was a neoconservative who had a plan for assassinating Julian Assange. Pompeo also spread disinformation about chemical weapons attacks by the Assad government in Syria, resulting in an escalation of the U.S. war on Syria and regime change operation that recently achieved success with the triumph of Al Qaeda in Syria. Pompeo and Trump ramped up the U.S. drone war in Somalia and elsewhere and advanced a large-scale propaganda campaign targeting Iran, Russia, and China in order to justify bellicose U.S. foreign policies targeting these countries that is putting us at the risk of World War III. In Ukraine, the CIA, starting with Obama but continuing through Trump and Biden, set up 12 bases, this after the 2014 Maidan coup, and this was reported in the New York Times. And the agency was busy in Pompeo's tenure and continuing also, of course, through Biden, training special Ukrainian intelligence commando units that carried out a Phoenix-style program. This from the Vietnam Phoenix program, many people will recall, was a program of kidnapping, torture, and assassination run by the CIA. This has been continued in Ukraine, targeting opponents of the U.S. coup regime in Ukraine and pro-Russian elements there, including civilian politicians like the head of the Socialist Party in Ukraine's parliament was hunted down and assassinated by U.S.-backed commandos in Russia. Pompeo's successor, but these programs were developed under Trump and continued under Biden. Pompeo's successor as DCI was the notorious Bloody Gina Haspel. Notorious she was for overseeing torture at a CIA block site in Thailand, and she had been a CIA agent in Russia and Azerbaijan in the 1990s, which was a key battleground in the new Great Game with Russia, run then by a brutal leader, Heydar Aliyev, imposed in the U.S.-backed coup in 1993. In general, I would suggest that it was CIA business as usual under Trump. He was not really taking on the deep state, despite much hullabaloo about Trump's alleged war with his deep state. So the question for tonight, and that our panelists will be addressing, is what can we expect from Trump's second term? A clue about the future, of course, lies in Trump's appointments. Trump's appointee as new CIA director, John Ratcliffe, is a former director of national intelligence and a House member from Texas who served as a partner in a law firm with John Ashcroft, George W. Bush's attorney general. Ashcroft, as we know, is infamous for his support for torture and evisceration of civil liberties in the so-called War on Terror. Known for his ultra-conservative voting record in Congress, Ratcliffe supported a bill signed into law by Barack Obama establishing greater cybersecurity cooperation between the United States and Israel and authorizing the Department of Homeland Security to work more with Israel on border control and maritime and aviation security. A graduate of Notre Dame and Southern Methodist University, Ratcliffe is a supporter of sweeping government surveillance powers, having lobbied for the extension of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which allows the government to spy on American citizens without a warrant. In 2023, Ratcliffe and several other former Trump officials, including Mike Pompeo and Bill Barr, sent a letter to House Speaker Mike Johnson to support the extension, fitting a tradition of advancing disinformation to whip up the public against a foreign enemy being targeted for regime change. Ratcliffe has pushed claims about Iran allegedly hacking Trump campaign computers and plotting to kill the president-elect, charges Tehran has strongly denied. Ratcliffe has used the allegations to call for the U.S. to join Israel in taking a harder line against Iran. Like Marco Rubio, the neoconservative Secretary of State, incoming, at least if he's approved, Ratcliffe is also a China hawk and has called on the U.S. to prepare for a confrontation with Beijing. He wrote in an op-ed published by the Wall Street Journal in December 2020, if I could communicate one thing to the American people, is that the People's Republic of China poses the greatest threat to America today and the greatest threat to democracy and freedom worldwide since World War II. Ratcliffe's selection is a good indication of the Trump administration's pivot to China and Iran as targets for regime change and war rather than Russia. A New York Times report highlighted that as Director of National Intelligence, Ratcliffe approved selective declassification intelligence that aimed to score political points and made public assertions that contradicted professional intelligence assessments, which does not inspire confidence that he will end the politicization of intelligence, which is a cancer that Ray has done so much to expose, as well as others on this panel. Now, a wild card appointment by Trump designed to cater to elements of his base that are anti-war is the selection of Tulsi Gabbard as Director of National Intelligence to replace Avril Haines. Now, Haines, as we know in this group of speakers, is an absolute disaster. I had 5 points of terrible things she did. One was planning for draconian COVID lockdowns and censorship. Two was loosening regulations on drone strikes. Three was covering up CIA torture. Four was advancing Ukrainian disinformation and being a gung-ho hawk on Ukraine. And five was her role as a coordinator of the Russiagate hoax. And it should be noted she was a paid consultant for the CIA spy firm Palantir, which is a leading war profiteer in Ukraine and Israeli onslaught in Gaza. So Hines was absolutely horrific. Now, Gabbard is an absolute breath of fresh air compared to Avril Haines. Gabbard is an Iraq war veteran who pushed for U.S. diplomacy with Russia and Syria, questioned the claim that Assad had used chemical weapons as a basis for U.S. escalation in Syria, challenged other CIA and U.S. government disinformation, warned and pushed for investigation about U.S. biolabs in Ukraine, and wanted to end repeal the USA Patriot Act and end the forever wars. These positions led her to be attacked during the 2020 Democratic Party primary. Gabbard, then running as a Democrat, criticized Kamala Harris for her hawkish foreign policies and anti-Russia obsession. And of course, she was virulently attacked in neo-McCarthyite terms during that primary, and that caused her to leave the Democratic Party. I attended a speech she gave in 2023 in Washington at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and she spoke very eloquently, warning about the dangers of nuclear war breaking out as a result of U.S. military provocations in support of Ukraine. Now, Gabbard's appointment has met a lot of vitriol from the national security establishment. Abigail Spanberger is a Democrat from Virginia who is a former CIA agent, and she's part of a dangerous class. We've done an expose at CovertAction about how the CIA has infiltrated the Democratic Party and placed its agents in Congress. One of those is Abigail Spanberger. She has served 3 terms in the House, and she was in an uproar when they appointed Gabbard. She declared in a post on X that, quote, she was appalled by the selection of Gabbard, stating that not only is Tulsi ill-prepared and unqualified, but she traffics in conspiracy theories and cozies up to dictators like Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin. And then a group of 40 national security officials wrote a letter to Charles Schumer trying to block Gabbard's appointment, echoing some of the same spurious points as Abigail Spanberger. Now, in advance of her confirmation hearing, Gabbard has backtracked on the issue of warrantless surveillance to foreigners considered to be a potential national security threat, and his communications could be of intelligence use. Nevertheless, if Gabbard gets in, perhaps we might see some positive changes in the ways that veteran intelligence professionals for Sanity would like to see. And we're lucky tonight to have four members of this great organization. And Ray could perhaps and the others say a bit more about the circumstance of its founding. But again, this group is a group of dedicated intelligence professionals committed to the highest standard of their profession, who want to see greater transparency and truth telling and end the politicization of intelligence and attempt to manipulate public opinion by intelligence agencies. And CovertAction magazine shares the goals and values of this group. So we're very happy to team with them tonight. And now I'll turn it over to our four speakers, but let me just first give a brief introduction of each one. Our first speaker is John Kiriakou. John Kiriakou is a member of the board of directors of CovertAction magazine, and he also writes for CovertAction magazine and Consortium News, among other outlets. John has published many books, including The Reluctant Spy, My Secret Life in the CIA's War on Terror, and Doing Time Like a Spy, How the CIA Taught Me to Survive and Thrive in Prison. And I highly recommend these books. John is a great storyteller. He's a member of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, and he's also a courageous whistleblower who blew the lid on the CIA torture in the War on Terror, and he suffered 2.5 years in prison because of his truth-telling. So we're really grateful to have John as our first speaker, and I'll just introduce the other three speakers, and then we'll turn it over to John. Our second speaker is Colleen Rowley. She is a former FBI special agent and division legal counsel for the FBI in Minnesota, and also a whistleblower who was named as Time Magazine's Person of the Year for 2002. After the September 11th attacks, Rowley wrote a paper for FBI Director Robert Mueller documenting how FBI headquarters personnel in Washington had mishandled and failed to take action on information provided by the Minneapolis FBI field office regarding its investigation of suspected terrorist Zacarias Moussaoui. In 2006, Rowley ran for Congress on the ticket of Minnesota's Farmer Labor Party, and she is a member of the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. Our third speaker, Ray McGovern, was a 27-year CIA analyst going back to the era of the Vietnam War, who was a presidential briefer for George H.W. Bush. He's a regular writer for Consortium News and founder of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And a few years ago, I wrote an article in CovertAction magazine about Ray, who everybody knows is a stand-up guy. And the article was called "The Man Who Got Russiagate Right." So he's somebody we need to listen to because he gets it right, unlike a lot of our bureaucrats in Washington. And finally, we have Larry Johnson, a truth teller like Ray and Colleen and John. And he's also a former CIA analyst and member of Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. And he's worked as a political commentator and blogger who has appeared on the NewsHour and Larry King Live, among other TV shows. And you can check out his website at sonar21.com. He's got really sharp commentary and will give you the inside scoop. So John, the floor is yours now. And yeah, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and we'll select a couple questions at the end. Each speaker will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll have a bit of time for discussion at the end.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the seminar or event. I'm not really sure what we're calling it, but glad to have everybody here. I want to echo a lot of what Jeremy just said. I think that this second Trump administration may be incrementally better than what we had under Joe Biden's administration, which was absolutely awful, in some cases genocidal. But remember, from the moment that Donald Trump puts his right hand in the air on January 20th to take the oath of office, he's a lame duck. And it's going to be hard for him to keep his cats corralled. I want to add something too. I had occasion this weekend to go to Mar-a-Lago for the very first time. not to say that I saw anybody or spoke with anybody important there, but I spoke with some important people after this event at Mar-a-Lago, people who have Trump's ear or the inside track. And I asked them specifically for their thoughts on some of these national security appointments. There's a real danger that Tulsi Gabbard is not going to be confirmed. And it's not because the Democrats are united against her. The Democrats are united against her. It's that she's having trouble keeping the Republicans united, because this whole MAGA thing is already beginning to wear thin among some Republican senators. And where Tulsi's really getting tripped up is Section 702 of the FISA Act. Tulsi is of the same mind that we are when it comes to warrantless surveillance. It's wrong. It should be illegal. It should be unconstitutional. And somehow the government keeps getting away with it every 2 years when it's reapproved by the House and the Senate. She has had to tell senators, Republican senators, in these private meetings that she's been having the last several weeks, that she supports renewal of 702. We know that she doesn't support renewal of 702. Now, I'm hoping that she's saying that because she knows she has to say it to win their votes and get confirmed. I hope then that she can have an epiphany or a revelation once she's the director of national intelligence and she can back out of that. That would be a very Washington thing to do. But she's never served at a level so senior, so high as director of national intelligence. So we really don't know what's going to happen with Tulsi Gabbard. Another thing that I learned at Mar-a-Lago this weekend was that John Ratcliffe, the new CIA director designate, the 3-term House member from Texas, is really the guy on intelligence and national security issues. It's not Congressman Mike Walls, the new national security advisor. It's not Tulsi Gabbard. It's John Ratcliffe. And of all of the people involved in national security, and I'm including Marco Rubio in that, it is Ratcliffe who is the most neocon. He claims to be a MAGA Republican. He claims to be one of these people who is opposed to foreign interventions. I'm just not sure that that's true. And if he's the one who has Trump's ear more readily than anybody else, I'm going to be a little bit worried about that. We don't really know very much about Mike Walls, the now former congressman from Florida, who's going to be the national security advisor. Presumably, he's going to be taking orders from Ratcliffe rather than Ratcliffe taking orders from Walls, which is the normal pace of things. And we don't think that Tulsi is really going to have much of a say in overall intelligence policy because the director of national intelligence never does. The director of national intelligence is in charge ostensibly of, 18 federal intelligence agencies. But don't forget that just about every single one of those intelligence agencies falls under the Secretary of Defense. And the Secretary of Defense outranks the Director of National Intelligence. So really the only influence that the DNI has on the intelligence community is budgetary. And that really doesn't help us stay out of foreign interventions. I'm hoping, and remember what they say in business school, hope is not a strategy, but I'm hoping that Donald Trump is sincere about ending the war in Ukraine, about staying out of other countries' business, about leaving Syria to its own devices, and about some sort of an agreement eventually somehow with the government of Iran. Otherwise, I don't think we're going to get it from some of these other players. I also wanted to talk for a minute or two about Senator Marco Rubio. I'm as mystified as anybody as to why in the world Donald Trump chose Marco Rubio to be Secretary of State. Marco Rubio is a Republican in the mold of George W. Bush and every other neoconservative that came before him. He's known for his especially hardcore stances against Cuba and against Venezuela. I was very fortunate a year ago to go to Cuba and to see it for myself and to meet with average Cubans on the street and official Cubans up to one of the vice presidents of the country, with whom a group of us Americans had dinner and talked about relations between our two countries. I'm not at all sanguine that Donald Trump or Marco Rubio on behalf of Donald Trump is going to do anything at all to improve U.S. relations with Cuba. I think that the situation with Venezuela is worse. I think that what we're going to see under Donald Trump is a continuation of the Joe Biden policy on Venezuela, which in turn was a continuation of the first Donald Trump policy toward Venezuela. I think we're going to remain in a virtual state of war with that country, and nothing good is going to come of it. And forgive me for being Debbie Downer here, but I think Donald Trump's going to be even worse than Joe Biden has been on Israel. If I were Palestinian, I wouldn't be optimistic in any way. Joe Biden just last week, at the end of the week, announced another $8 billion in lethal aid to Israel. There's no indication at all that the Palestinians are getting one red cent, and I mean not even in kind, like in food or clean water or medical supplies. This evening, we saw an announcement come from the White House saying that the two sides are very close to an agreement to release hostages. Great. In exchange for what? The war is going to continue. Palestinian civilians are going to continue to die. There's not one single working hospital anywhere in Gaza. The situation is deadly in the West Bank. It's not terribly much better than what it is in Gaza. When Donald Trump says that Gaza would make fantastic beachfront resort property, and he compares it to Monte Carlo, I think we should take him at his word. He doesn't mean to be developed by and for Palestinians. He means for it to be developed by and for Israeli settlers. And I just don't think that's going to change. I am optimistic that that relations with Russia will improve. Trump said on Friday that his people are in the process of coordinating a telephone call with Vladimir Putin, and that he and Putin will meet soon after he takes the oath of office. That is always a good thing. Diplomacy is always a good thing. But we can't say the same thing about China. I don't think that there's anybody in government who's sincere about improving relations with China. So what will make the Trump administration any different from the Biden administration? Why is it that we're supposedly or reportedly preparing for war with China when Taiwan is saying, wait a minute, we're not on the brink of war with China. Why do you guys keep talking about war with China? It's because we're the ones that are instigating this problem. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, listen, everything that we accuse the Iranians of doing and the North Koreans of doing and the Chinese of doing, we do literally every single day. That's why we have NSA. NSA's job isn't just to intercept communications, electronic communications. It's also to disrupt cyber networks. That's what they get paid to do. So this self-flagellation and victimhood just doesn't fly. Yes, of course, we need better cybersecurity, but everybody else needs better cybersecurity against us too. So this ongoing drumbeat of complaints over cybersecurity just doesn't do anything for me. It just seems to be empty. When I was at the CIA, we had an ongoing joke during the George W. Bush administration that none of us had ever seen an administration that worked so hard to not talk to our enemies. We had a State Department with thousands and thousands of employees who just sat there twiddling their thumbs and doing nothing because we don't talk to the Cubans or the Iranians or the Chinese or the Venezuelans or the Russians or the Libyans or a dozen other countries. We don't talk to them. I went on an overseas trip when I was working on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I went to Djibouti, Somalia, Ethiopia, and I was forbidden from going to Eritrea, not by the Eritrean government, but by the State Department. And the only reason they gave me is, oh, you don't want to go to Eritrea. That's the North Korea of Africa. That's what I was told. I was recently invited to dinner at the Eritrean ambassador's residence here in Washington. I can go do that, but I can't go to Eritrea because we don't like them. As I said, I hope that this begins to change under Donald Trump. I'm not sure that it will change markedly. And even if it does change, I'm just not of the belief that those changes are going to be necessarily long-standing. And that's why it's up to us to keep writing our elected officials, to keep writing and speaking and marching and making sure that our elected officials know what we want in a government foreign policy and in a government intelligence policy. We should be at these hearings. We should be taking notes and writing op-eds and speaking to friends and doing podcasts and making sure that our voices are heard. It's an uphill struggle, but it's something that has to be done. And thank you for listening to me.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And now we're going to turn to Colleen.
Hi. I want to endorse everything John just said. I think he was spot on and he has really excellent insights. I think any of us would be very foolish to put out specific expectations or predictions. You know, none of us have crystal balls, and it's especially difficult now because there's so many unknowns. At least we do know for a long time, we didn't know who Trump would even nominate to be in his cabinet. And so then we could say, well, it all depends on if he brings in the same old Pompeo and Bolton's back in. Well, we know he's got a new set of faces. However, again, I think John's right about a lot of the his descriptions of these people. I'm going to talk about Kash Patel as the nominee for the FBI director. The reason is, you know, that's what I did for 24 years FBI. And the second reason is I do think that he's different from the last three, at least the last three FBI directors, which were basically these war profiteering bureaucrat suits. People criticize Patel and they say he's not qualified, but you know, Mueller and Comey were Department of Justice bureaucrat attorneys. I don't even know how much courtroom experience they had. And then the same thing with Wray. They were all out of DOJ essentially. And they all came, I don't think Mueller did, but definitely Comey and Wray came into the FBI directorship with millions of dollars of war profiteering money. Comey, I think, was a vice president of Lockheed Martin and came with $3 million. So they were very incentivized, as you know, the Eisenhower warning to keep this all going. So I don't think Kash Patel is in that mold. He worked a few years as a defense attorney. And then, yes, he was in Department of Justice. He was a prosecutor. I think when people say he's not qualified, that doesn't make sense. One of the other criticisms he's received is that he's going to seek retribution against some of the enemies of Trump. Of course, the people that were involved in the Russiagate hoax come to mind, for starters. And so, you know, the Democrats are all concerned that he'll seek retribution. But if you realize that Russiagate hoax that the FBI was, you know, extremely involved in, meant that we had FBI agents and attorneys lying on applications to surveil important people. You know, they even went after the president himself, and we still don't even know the predication it was based on. That's all been covered up. But they lied in these applications to the Foreign Intelligence Court. You really have to go back almost to those days of COINTELPRO to see this kind of a Russiagate, or the days of Nixon's Watergate, to see how the Russiagate thing played out. And all that high level leaking, which normally, you know, as a whistleblower, we're happy to see some leaks, but this was not leaking of actual factual things. It was not from lower level people. It was from people like Director Comey, who was trying to foment manipulate and manufacture public opinion by leaking things. That actually came from the FBI director level, who had to be a leaker, which is, and McCabe as well, the second guy. So when Kash Patel calls for reform, I think actually that would resonate with, again, the American people of all parties should be for reform of the FBI. We don't want to go back to that Hoover era and the COINTELPRO with the disruption and infiltration, etc. So three things that Kash Patel really impressed me, that these were really good points. Now, again, I don't necessarily think he's going to be Frank Church. I think he'll be stopped from doing anything too terribly radical to reform the FBI. I'm sure he will allow, some of the mass surveillance to go on. Probably the infiltration of groups that could possibly get even worse, with infiltration into Palestinian groups and people who are against anti-war groups. That could even probably get worse. But these are three things he called for that are good. For starters, transparency. If there's anything that we need right now, it's transparency. And frankly, if there had been any transparency both before and after 9/11, I might not have had to become a whistleblower. The 9/11 Commission itself said that if the information had been shared within the agencies, between the agencies, and most importantly, with the public, which people don't understand, they're just happy to be ignorant about these things. But if all of the warnings that had been coming in the summer of 2001 had been shared with the public, it may have been stopped just because of sharing the information. So transparency, he said he will declassify documents. One document that, again, if it isn't kabuki theater, John talked about how both parties play off each other, and frankly, a lot of times it's a fake little show just to tell, to get the people divide and conquer the public. However, if there is any reality to that transparency should start with declassifying the document that I'm trying to think who McCabe. It was the acting director, McCabe, signed off on, that he was going to target the president. Again, if we're worried about our great exceptionalist, country that is, supposed to be a ruler-based order to control the world, if anyone's worried about that, how in the heck can we have a situation where we have a lower-ranking bureaucrat spying on and targeting the president? I mean, that's pretty incredible. It's been swept under the rug. There looks like there was little or no reason for it, except apparently Trump fired Comey, and McCabe was loyal to Comey, so he decided that he would go after Trump. Unbelievable. Well, so transparency and declassification. The second thing that Kash Patel has called for was decentralizing the FBI. He probably made a joke about how you could turn the FBI headquarters into a museum. Well, you know what? All of my kids, and I know tons of other kids, have toured the FBI headquarters. Basically, they tour it as a museum. There's a little tour that they go on, and a lot of kids thought it was the best tour ever. So it actually isn't that silly an idea. And also because everyone that I knew in the FBI who had to go to FBI headquarters in Washington thought it was the worst thing possible. There's a lot of reasons for that I don't have time to go into, but they were doing hard time at FBI headquarters on Pennsylvania Avenue. And they tried to get out as soon as they could. And that's why you had this careerism. The only reason they raised their hand to go was they thought they could rise up the chain, and then they could go through the revolving door at some point if they joined the senior executive service and make a lot of money. And a lot of them did, but they were not the best investigators. They were the careerists. If you know what happened before 9/11, the offices that knew anything about Al-Qaeda terrorism was, number one, the New York City office. They had a couple of people who could actually speak Arabic. FBI headquarters had some translators maybe, but the New York office was following the whole development, even though the CIA did not tell them much, but they were on top of it more so than any other entity. And then the Minneapolis and the Phoenix field offices tried to warn FBI headquarters. Okay. And what happened? It was FBI headquarters that stopped all of this. And so the lesson from history here, Kash Patel's recommendation to decentralize the FBI and put more power back with the agents who are doing the work. They're investigating all the different white collar frauds and violent crimes and terrorism and child pornography, all the different 300 and some different crimes. It's all done in the field, not in Washington, D.C. The people like McCabe, I hate to name call, he'll probably come after me, but the people like McCabe, we called them paper pushers, and they were supposed to have oversight. But basically, they just did their time and tried to get out of there and go up to the next level. And a lot of times they did not want to do anything that would risk, that they thought would be risky. And basically, that tells you what happened before 9/11. No one was willing to even read the documents that were sent in from Minneapolis. And later on, many of those paper pushers, there were 10 or 11 of them, including even the director, who got memos that said bin Laden and the Chechen terrorist Abu Khattab were entwined. That memo was written in April of 2001. And afterwards, those 10 assistant directors claimed they hadn't even read it. Now so Kash Patel, I'm just telling you, I know a lot that you could use if you get arguments about decentralizing some of this power away from Washington, D.C. and back into the field offices that actually do the work. And by the way, decentralizing the power would automatically depoliticize it. One of the reasons why you get these Strocks and McCabe's and people is because they're there. They're in Washington, where all this lobbying and military industrial and intelligence pressures are right there. And they think they have to do things because it surrounds them. But if you get out further to Omaha and Anchorage and Springfield and all the places out, whatever, you're not going to be nearly as vulnerable to that politicization pressure. So it would be a natural. The last thing I'm going to say is he's called for, basically restoring trust in the FBI. And that goes back to what I said. At this point, we're looking at an FBI that has almost gone down that rabbit hole to the point of COINTELPRO. And with the Russiagate, that was very apparent. And Kash Patel is one of the main figures who tried to root that out. He even knows what it's like to be a whistleblower in some ways, because he got pilloried after he worked with Devin Nunes to bring some of these lies that the FBI had put into their applications and their affidavits. He tried to get that out. And of course, Washington, D.C. was not having it. They were in the midst of a Russiagate. And actually, Kash Patel, I think, knows what it's like to try to tell the truth, and then have the power mongers, squash the truth. So anyways, I think if there's anything that he could do to root out that kind of corruption and to reform the FBI, and one of the ways I would suggest reforming it is to decentralize the foreign intelligence power out of Washington as well. You could easily have agents going to district judges throughout the United States, especially after 9/11. They built these special soundproof skiffs all over the country. And the judge and the agents can go into these skiffs. They can give, classified briefings, and they would not need to funnel this through the politicized hierarchy in Washington. Now, do I think this will happen? No, but it is a really good idea. And it's one of the ways that you can, again, you can lower the corruption and actually, frankly, do the job. You can do the job much better. And you're not lowering the legal standard because it still remains probable cause. The legal standards are the same. The judges are the same. It's just where it's happening. Now, some things, those are that Kash Patel, I don't know if he's going to get in or not. I suppose it's 50-50. I'm not sure. But one of the things I doubt he will change is the use of informants and the spying, the domestic spying that has creeped up in recent years. And the reason for this is even though the Republicans were spied on, and they, you know what, they should know what it feels like. They should know what it feels like when they're the target. And then they should, when a Section 702 comes up for renewal, you would think that Trump, for starters, would say, you know, I was spied on. I mean, I'm going to stop this ability to do this. And when Kash Patel has power, you'd think that he would say, you know, we don't want this to happen anymore. But I doubt that's going to happen because it goes back to that George Carlin. At the end of the day, they're all in a club and they make nice and they forget about, oh, well, you came after us. Now we can go after you. And it's kind of a game. It's a fun game. So I'm pretty pessimistic that would change. The other thing is I think the informant infiltrations and the use of these aren't just normal informants. An informant is supposed to be a low-level person who in any kind of organization group who just is you know, supposed to be listening in case they hear about a violent plot or something. But actually what it turned out to be is they use con artists. After 9/11, Robert Mueller and then Comey as well, Ray as well, they thought the best thing would be to send these hundreds and thousands of well-paid con artists into all of these groups, including even anti-war groups. People might remember initially Michael Moore's movie. There was a bunch of people. They were like 70, 80-year-old anti-war group. They were eating cookies, and one of the people in there was spying on them. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's an inefficient use of manpower for starters. If you want to reduce the government spending and have it more effective, you would not be spying on little old ladies like the group I'm in, Women Against Military Madness. The founder just died at 103. I mean, for heaven's sakes, this is not where you would be spending your money. Unfortunately, I think that's going to be hard to curtail, and I would expect that Kash Patel will even expand the groups to the Palestinian groups. There's been a lot of talk and equating people that just are against genocide. If you're against genocide in the West Bank and in Gaza, they equate you with being a terrorist. And I would think that maybe that kind of informant spying might extend in it. And they've talked about, you know, taking the nonprofit status away from a lot of groups. So I think that's a possibility. One thing I think is going to happen is I think we're going to see more mass violence. And this is not just mass shooters. As you know, you can use anything, any of these talking heads, these former FBI directors and all these former FBI agents who go on TV. Oh, what was the motive? Well, there's no motive anymore. These are just senseless acts because the country now has become very depressed, very radicalized, very polarized. And now a lot of people have weapons, but you don't even need a gun. Now you just need a car or a truck, and you can even do violence in many other ways. And I think it comes from 20 some years now of perpetual war and desensitizing people to the military. In fact, one of the reasons I think that is because a lot of the mass violence are former military. And it's just because they become desensitized, and there's a lot of reasons for it. But, you know, that I think we're going to see more of. And it's due to our mass media, huge mass media, constant encouraging people to think, well, if I'm the American sniper, we dedicated a movie to American Sniper. Well, why wouldn't people want to become the American sniper? Because they think they'll be a hero. The last thing I will just say that I think is going to happen is I think we'll probably see more whistle. So the difference, though, there's two terms here: whistleblowing and leaking. I think we're going to see a lot of leaking. I think maybe even more so than during the Russiagate. And it's important that people distinguish leaking from whistleblowing. Whistleblowing is what many of my colleagues did. And it's when you know something and you're trying to get the facts out to tell the truth to the public. You're trying to get through a cover-up. It's not what Comey did when he went to the media and said, here are my notes from debriefing Trump about the P-Gate Steele dossier. That is not whistleblowing. I'm saying there is a difference here. And you've got to, and the public is all told these are all good whistleblowing, and that's not true. And there's ways of telling this, but I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think, especially if Trump does try to do anything like reduce and the perpetual wars and reform the FBI, reform the intelligence. Ideally, he would get a new church committee going. That would be the ideal. But I think then we will have more officials trying to go to their what do you call them? The news reporters who have got their sources in government and have made their career out of propaganda. And I think we're going to see more of that happening too. Unfortunately, again, I'm a little Debbie Downer on that. But one thing we can do is I said this to Ray McGovern a couple of days ago. These are just these idioms. We can cross our fingers. We can cross our fingers and hope for the best, but no one should hold their breath.
Well, thank you very much, Colleen. That was very informative and a very good assessment. So Ruth is just going to come on for a minute with a pitch for covert action, and then we'll have Ray speak.
Hi, good evening, everyone. And we appreciate you joining us tonight. I'm Ruth Jackson Lawrence, and I'm honored to be a part of this important conversation with you. I've been working with Covert Action for a couple of months now, and I'm thrilled to be a part of this poignant mission to bring the truth to the surface in a world of misinformation. Covert Action is an independent news organization that relies heavily on contributions from supporters like you to keep exposing the truths that others won't. If you value what we do, please click the donation link pinned in the comments to contribute. We have some hard-hitting stories on the horizon that you don't want to miss. Every bit of support helps us stay independent and impactful, so we appreciate you being here.
Great. Thank you, Ruth. Now I'll turn it over to Ray McGovern.
Good evening. Can I be heard? Good. All right. Well, thanks, Jeremy. And Colleen Rowley is always a hard act to follow. I endorse everything she said, and I'd call particular attention to what she said about unpredictability. We're all in an area of conjecture here. Trump is the epitome of unpredictability. So what we say here is speculative. Some of it can be even hopeful, and I'm going to add a few hopeful notes, but it's very unpredictable. We'll know more, not in 10 days or 2 weeks, but in a month or so as to whether there's much hope. Some of the assignments or some of the nominations have not been very hopeful, at least from my point of view. Now, one of the things that I just allude to is Jeremy's point about we being really junkyard dogs on this business of Russiagate, how we called attention to the fact that even the head of CrowdStrike, the outfit that Mueller, or not Mueller, but Comey, in his wisdom, hired to look into the hacks by Russia of the DNC emails and Hillary's emails so prejudicial to Hillary. Well, most Americans don't know that that was disproven by CrowdStrike itself. Sean Henry, its boss, testified before Congress on December 5th, 2017. Was it 2025 now? Do the math, folks. That's how long it has been public in a way that there is no technical evidence of Russian hacking. And that was the core of the issue back early, Russian hacking into the DNC emails. So why is that important? Well, it's important because I remember being asked at the time, McGovern, why are you so fixed on Russiagate, disproving it and all? What you're kind of, one of my best friends said, "Yeah, you sound like a one-act pony." Finally, I was asked by a radio interviewer, "Why is this?" And I said, "Well, I guess it's because Russia has nuclear weapons. I guess. I mean, do you do the connection?" Suffice it to say, the American public has been conditioned to a point where they think that Vladimir Putin and the Russians are evil incarnate. They could be rallied rather easily to support an unnecessary war because of the conditioning, I would say brainwashing, that they've been subjected to for over 8 years. So that's big. That's big. Can Trump change that? Oh, well, I think there's reason for hope that he can. One of the things that escapes attention and what really bears mention is Oreshnik. Now, Oreshnik is the word for a hazelnut tree, okay? And the Russians gave that to this Wunderwaffe, this wonder weapon, that they used successfully against Dnipropetrovsk 2 months ago. And its impact rivals a nuclear weapon without the fallout and all that kind of thing. Is that a game changer? I suggest we ought to call game changers game changers. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to call the Oreshnik a game changer, okay? Now, the U.S. has obfuscated this, but there it is, and the evidence is there. What am I saying? I'm saying that for the first time in my lifetime, and that's a long time, okay? The Russians have the advantage on us in some strategic weaponry. My God. And there's no indication that those clucks at the Defense Department even know or even give a whit about it. So all the more important that we not blacken the Russians to the point where we can't unblacken them. Now, how about positive signs? I said, well, there could be positive signs. Some have been mentioned, but I want to mention others that just in from the wire, as we used to say. Did you know that John Kiriakou is going to be appointed director of the Bureau of Prisons? Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Did you know the reason why Scott Ritter can't join us here? Well, Donald Trump saw a couple of Scott's interviews. He saw him just quaffing down that Diet Coke. He said, "That's my kind of guy." And Scott is being groomed to be the new chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, putting on his old Marine uniform with a couple of stars on it. That's a reason for hope there. So that's why Scott is not with us today. Jeffrey Sachs. Whoa, he used some strong language, didn't he? He said that Netanyahu was I won't even say it. It's so bad. Okay. Trump again. That's my kind of guy. What does he do? He retweets it. Now, Jeff, I'm reliably informed, is kind of being an understudy for Tulsi Gabbard in case she doesn't make it. Whoa, wouldn't that be so? Maybe he'll be her deputy if he does make if Tulsi does make it. In any event, I see the politicians in Washington being in some desperation to have Tulsi Gabbard in that position. Witness the fact that as Jesus called Lazarus out of the tomb, the powers that be called William Webster, who used to be head of the CIA as well as the FBI, out of his 100-year retirement and had him say, "My God, Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel would be the worst thing I ever saw in terms of our national security." That's how desperate they are. They put words in the mouth of 100. No, I have nothing against 100-year lows. I'm approaching that myself, but my God. It's pretty transparent, isn't it? What else? Oh, one more. Yeah. Um, Someone named Colleen Rowley is on the roster here to be ready to take it if Kesh Patel doesn't make it. Whoa. Now, you might say that these are apocryphal things, but I have them on my list here, and wouldn't that be neat? And wouldn't it be nice if someone came in, unlike Avril Haines that was mentioned before? I mean, let's face it, compared to what? Compared to Avril Haines, we're going to have somebody much better, no matter who he or she is. And, I have to say, in addition to John Kiriakou's remarks, that she or he in that position does or can potentially play a very strong role in advising the president. After all, the National Director of Intelligence is the chief advisor to the president now, not the head of the CIA. So if she, well, let's say, oh, just out of the blue, that 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, the Director of National Intelligence told President Biden that Russia was running out of ammunition in Ukraine. It doesn't have any indigenous capability to produce the weaponry that is leaving on the field. My God, the Ukrainians are about to win. Or a CIA director like Bill Burns that told the president in July of last year, Putin has already lost and his military has been exposed for the feckless exercise that we all know it is. So, how can you do worse than these guys? I don't know. Let's hope that we can. Okay, beyond the apocryphal to the real. Now, positive signs again, real ones. Trump seems to be listening, or at least he has some of his people listen. He might be. Do we know whether Trump is live streamed into this Zoom? No, we don't. Well, he could be because we know he's watching Judge Napolitano. We know that because of what Trump is being saying about Ukraine, about other very important things. Now, I joked with the judge most recently, and I said, look, you better check. He may be your latest subscriber because what Trump has said is, my God, I can understand why the Russians don't want Ukraine and NATO. Who can't understand that? That they would have a major military force right in the border. I understand that, for God's sake. I even sympathize with that. For God's sake, why are we doing that? And in that same vein, why did we nix the deal that was formalized, that was initialed in Istanbul in April of 2022, six weeks after the war started in Ukraine? They made a deal. They initialed it. The Ukrainians and the Russians talking to each other, and it included no Ukraine in NATO. What happened? Well, the US and the UK nixed it. Trump, why did they do that? I don't know why they did that. Sotto voce, you got 1 million people killed because you wanted that thing to go on, all with the feckless attempt to weaken Russia when Russia emerged stronger from all this. I don't get it, says Trump. And the last thing he said is, these firing of these longer range missiles into Ukraine, my God, that's foolish. What are they trying to do? I mean, firing the longer ones into Russia proper, okay? This is crazy. What are they trying to do? Whose idea was that? Now, again, unpredictability is the byword for Donald Trump. But these are hopeful signs, are they not? And it's probably more than just we in this kind of venue that are telling him these things. So I'd point out that there is room for hope, that the very idea of him being unpredictable is could be a good, because he could always be predictably good as well as unpredictably bad. What other things? Well, he clearly has made it clear he's going to talk with Vladimir Putin. Now, why is that a big deal? Hello? It's been 1 month short of 2 years since an American president has talked to Russian President Putin. 2 years. That's not good. That's stupid. So that's going to happen, and that itself will embrace a momentum to get together with to get some sort of talks going on Ukraine. And let's realize that Trump, for good or ill, has other priorities. Western Asia, the Far East. Well, I don't think those priorities are very good either, but he clearly wants to get the Ukraine thing off his desk. Is there flexibility enough on Trump's part? I think so. On Putin's part, I'm sort of an outlier on that, but I think there is. I think if Putin wanted to take over all of Ukraine or Poland or the Baltic states, like Biden says he's sure he was, well, that's a different matter, but he's not, of course. In a very crass way, the new president, Trump can say, well, I got a personal promise. He actually signed us a little note here that says, I promise not to invade Poland. That's a big deal. Remember, he was going to invade. He's not going to do that anymore. So there's lots of rhetorical things that can be done here as well. I just want to finish with a kind of, something that is going to be very alive in Germany in these next few weeks. It's just about 6 weeks before the Germans have a new national election, the 23rd of February. Guess what? The question with respect to who blew up Nord Stream pipelines is now in the media. It's in the air. One of the major parties is taking a stance on this. Find out who did it. We don't believe this story about 6 Ukrainians and a nurse on a sailboat. Okay, and the new party, Sarah Wagenknecht's party, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, is garnering more votes than anyone ever expected. Now, I'll finish with this because it has to do with what I see to be our mission, our common mission, not only just telling the truth, but making sure it gets out there. And it's a mission to the American people who are kept in the dark on lots of these things, but there are signs, as I've just said, of some hope on this score. So I want to quote one of Sarah Wagenknecht's prime deputies, or one of the biggest persons in this movement. Her name is Sevin Dagladen, and she said this. I'm going to say it in German first because it sort of resonates with me. Then it's very, very, very short, and then I'll translate it. Okay, you ready? Es ist unsere erste Pflicht, von diesem Königreich von Lügen sich nicht dumm machen zu lassen. Okay? Es ist unsere erste Pflicht. It's our first duty von diesem Königreich, from this kingdom, der Lügen of lies. It's our first duty in this kingdom of lies, nicht dumm machen zu lassen, not let ourselves be made dumb. Okay? Now, we're not dumb, and we can't be less outspoken than we have in the past, despite the odds. But I think the odds are increasing against our disfavor. In other words, I think we're getting more of a listenership and readership and viewership. And if the fact that Trump can get the right story on Ukraine on those 3 key issues that I just mentioned, well, isn't that a hopeful sign? We'll see how it all works out in the coming months, but let's not be too pessimistic. Some of these people are not the best people we would pick, but Trump's going to be running this. It's Trump that's going to be telling General Kellogg what to do. And you can be sure that little Rubio is going to do what Trump tells him to do, or else he'd be right out of there. So it all depends on an unpredictable Trump. I wish I could be more hopeful, but I hope I've engendered just a little bit of hope into the discussion. Thanks for listening.
Great. Thanks so much, Ray. And finally, we'll have Larry Johnson speak. And yeah.
Okay. I'm here in the cleanup position. Think of me as the guy that walks behind the elephants with the broom and the dustpan. You know, that's my role in life. A couple of things and observations. I appreciate everything that both John, Colleen, and Ray have shared so far. So I don't want to plow that territory again. Number one, we do know that Trump is being lied to by the intelligence community. We know that because in his interview with Time Magazine and Person of the Year, he referred to the massive casualties that Russia was suffering. The only way he's going to know that is that's what he's being briefed on by the CIA. That is simply not true. It's a complete misrepresentation of reality. But so how do we correct that? This goes back to the issue of Tulsi Gabbard. Now, John was correct that she does have limited power in certain areas, but there are two sort of things written into the law that does give her a potential to be influential. One is she does all covert actions have to be passed by her. Doesn't mean she has a veto, but she is going to be briefed on all covert actions. But more importantly, and we'll find out how clever a bureaucratic player she is, she controls the presidential daily brief now. You know, as Ray knows, that used to be handled at CIA up on the 7th floor, the one office that was right next to just outside the operations center. And CIA held on to that tightly. And then came the reorganization and the creation of the Director of National Intelligence, and they moved all that out there so that they could also incorporate FBI briefings. If Tulsi's smart, she'll be going down doing the briefings, or at least accompanying the officers, who I'm presuming are primarily CIA officers, but there may be folks from other agencies. That way you're sitting in front of the president every morning, giving him a briefing. And from people I know who have been involved in briefing Trump, that contrary to the Washington talk, Trump is a very engaged individual, asks very penetrating questions, and compared to Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and George W. Bush, was ranked as the best person to brief in terms of being engaged, that you knew that you were talking to somebody. So if that's the case, then maybe Tulsi will have a chance to correct the lies. The other thing that that Trump needs to take a look at is this CIA meddling with these Islamic extremist groups, with ISIS, with al-Nusra, with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, with Mujahideen al-Khalq. On the one hand, if anybody's watched the Sean Ryan podcast, he's had this former CIA analyst by the name of Sarah Adams on. And I was watching a little bit, and man, that's a disinformation campaign being run if I've ever seen one. Because here was Sarah talking about, boy, this Islamic threat, it was this monolith, it's Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the Hamas, they're all one. Hamas, Hezbollah, they're all one. And then as she's saying that, the previous week, the State Department lifted the $10 million reward that was on the head of Mohammed al-Julani, who was now he was on the head of HTS, which was listed in the top 10 of terrorist groups since 2017. Quite an accomplishment. It's not quite making Dick Clark's list of the top 10, but it was the top 10. So on the one hand, we have the U.S. government policy which tries to whip up this anti-Islamic fever and get all Americans afraid of every Islamist. Behind every Muslim, there's a terrorist with a suicide belt. While the CIA is happily going out, training, recruiting, providing arms, and hugs when necessary. So, someone needs to put some order to this madness. We need to stop enabling these people. My final comment, and it does riff off of Ray's point of Trump being unpredictable, because on the one hand, we have Donald Trump taking anywhere between $50 million and $100 million from the widow of the wealthy Las Vegas Jew. But then we get Trump, as Ray noted, retweeting Jeffrey Sachs' pretty brutal but honest takedown of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, what's going on? And add to that, we've had Trump vowing that there's going to be hell to pay to the Hamas if they don't release those hostages by January 20th, which, apparently Trump hasn't watched any of the material coming out of Gaza to know that they've already descended below every level of hell possible. What I think we're seeing is this Donald Trump is doing the unexpected, talking belligerently, while actually fully anticipating that they're going to get a hostage deal that he's going to take credit for, whether or not he deserves it, regardless, but it will feed his ego. And I don't think there will be, he will not be embarrassed by not being able to make good on his threat to reap holy hell on the Palestinians. But that's what makes Trump a wild card in this. I do think he understands, though, and this is based upon conversation I had with a friend of mine. His job was to brief the presidents on SAP programs. And he talked to Trump early on in 2017, just after Trump had been elected, and he told him, "Hey, Mr. President, you need to get rid of a lot of these people. You need to move them out." Trump said, I've got this under control. December 2020, after Trump had lost the election, he saw my friend at one of the White House Christmas parties and approached him. And he said, I should have listened to you. So if Trump actually learned something from that experience, and then in what happened in the ensuing 4 years may have reinforced that, hopefully we're going to see some dramatic reforms at the CIA and at the FBI. If there are not those dramatic reforms, and Trump allows it to remain status quo, then he gets everything he deserves and things he doesn't deserve, because he can't say, I didn't know. He knows. They're bad. They need to be, in my view, taken to the bottom and rebuilt and start over. So on that positive note, I'll end.
Great. Well, thank you, Larry. Excellent comments. Yeah, I think we've really had a great analysis from our speakers and terrific insights tonight. So now we do have questions from our audience. We've got a few questions in the chat. And also, yeah, perhaps if any of the speakers want to engage with each other, we can also do that. And I've got one question I actually wanted to ask Colleen, but I'll just go through the list. The first question was for Ray, so I'll turn it over to Ray. Then, yeah, I may have a question for Colleen, and there's a couple other questions directed to different panelists. So, and actually, yeah, this question is for Ray and Larry. The question is, Russia is about the Russian pact with Iran. Do you guys think that this could be a game changer, I guess, as far as global geopolitics or related to U.S. policy vis-a-vis Russia and or Iran?
I'll let Ray go first.
Okay.
You're muted, Ray. There we go.
It will be very important. Can I be heard?
Yes.
Yeah, it's supposed to happen 3 days from now, like on the 17th. Okay.
Correct.
And Pezeshkian is going up to Moscow, the president of Iran, to sign this thing. I think it's important for lots of reasons. It's been in the works for almost 2 years now. It was supposed to have been signed at BRICS last fall. It wasn't. I thought at the time that the Russians were being very chary, being very circumspect. They didn't want to do anything to encourage the Iranians to do anything really rash, okay? And then they'd be on the hook to support them in one way or another. In any case, it was postponed. We know that. The dates hadn't been announced. So now it's going to be on the 17th. Well, what it will be is the kind of treaty that does not incur, by all accounts, a mutual defense obligation. So it will be unlike the Russia-North Korea treaty, which does say if one is attacked, the other is obligated to respond and help, okay? But it'll be everything short of that. A very close, coordinated, strategic treaty embracing all kinds of things, including direct aid and more trade and all that kind of thing. So it'll be big. And that's why I've been really worried that Biden and Sullivan might cook up some scheme to let Netanyahu hit out on Iran, attack Iran, missile Iran in the next days before the 17th. Because I think after the 17th, assuming the treaty is signed, they'd be less likely to do that. In any case, the Russians and the Chinese have big, big equities in that part of the world, okay? They're not going to let them down easy. And this is just a symbolic thing that Iran, now part of BRICS, for God's sake, Iran is really supported by some big players. And if the U.S. wants to support Israel in attacking Iran, well, even Iran itself has hypersonic missiles that cannot be downed and have shown the ability to hit deep inside Israel. Sorry to be so long in the answer, but yeah, I think it's a significant treaty. I think it was significant that it was postponed with respect to signing. I think it's more significant now that it is to be signed on the 17th of January.
Yeah, let me just chime in that I think it's a game changer from the standpoint that it now forces both Israel and the United States to consider the possibility that any attack on Iran could spill over and bring in Russia, which in the past never really, I think, factored into their considerations. The other aspect here is, apart from the Russia-Iran agreement, you've had Russia, China, and Iran carrying out joint military exercises now for more than 5 years. And the fact that they started 5 years ago means that the planning for these, in terms of their military staff sitting down, interacting, and building relationships, that started 6 years ago, because the planning for those kinds of exercises always starts at least 12 to 18 months out. So this is moving the needle in a direction that I think it's going to make it more difficult for the United States and or Israel to carry out any attack on Iran.
Great. Thank you, guys. Okay, we have a couple other questions. Actually, I wanted to pose a quick question to Colleen. And my question is, you mentioned the FBI informants. And yeah, I thought it was telling your point about how they infiltrated your anti-war group, and there are all these, older women. And this is not a good use of taxpayer dollar. But my question is about the January 6th, with Kash Patel. And I attended a hearing with three FBI whistleblowers, spoke about how the FBI was manipulating statistics about domestic violence extremism, and this was a way to kind of ramp up their budget. And I mean, we know that is a problem, but we know there's also that pattern of inflating threats. But now Kash Patel, yeah, I'm just wondering, if you think he may actually reinstate these whistleblowers and also investigate more. There are a lot of strange things that went on with regard to January 6th, including the pipe bombs and the FBI informants, and the Proud Boys and what role they may have played as provocateur. So what's your assessment or prediction with related to January 6th and this issue of domestic violence extremism?
Well, I think that's right that they do inflate they even inflated, obviously, after 9/11. They said Robert Mueller or someone in one of those positions said, we think there's 5,000 Al-Qaeda sleeper cells in the United States. And that was obviously to spark this war on terror that has really never ended until now. We support the terrorists in Syria. It's incredible how this propaganda works. So yeah, I think they were exaggerating that. The whistleblowers probably were the ones that either left and or were forced to leave. It will be difficult to rehire them. I know of a couple of examples of FBI agents who resigned and they allowed to rejoin afterwards, but it wasn't easy. In one case, they made them go back through new agents training. People don't even know this, but even the main undercover agent who started the breaking of the mob, his name was Joseph Pistone, Pistone. There's a book about him. He was the first undercover in the mafia. And right before I came, I met him a couple of times. The FBI forced him to leave later on. I mean, they forced him out. And he was like the hero. And I think eventually maybe they let him come back in or reinstated him somehow. But it's not easy. So good luck. I hope Kash Patel reinstates them, because I think they were right about their complaints about using the January 6th, whatever you want to call it, protest, insurrection at the Capitol. I think they exploited that. And I think those whistleblowers were correct in some of their complaints. And I would hope they would be reinstated. But again, don't hold your breath.
Great, thank you. And do you know if you think he'll investigate more what went on with the FBI informants, and we might actually learn if there was a covert operation at play?
Again, it's one of those things you can hope. The pressures in Washington, D.C. are extraordinary. And Kash Patel, again, people don't know this, and I don't even know if Frank Church knew it, but Frank Church was targeted during the COINTELPRO himself. Senator Frank Church was a target of the NSA's Minaret program, which probably, if he did know, and even if he maybe had a sense of this, it helped his efforts to reform. And again, that's a little bit of hope that lies with Kash Patel. He knows he saw this from the inside. And so his declassifying of some of this stuff, they will never give out informant identities. But I think they said there were 25 now. I think that came out that there were 20 or 25 FBI sources that were in the crowd. And even if he gives out information without giving out actual identities, it's possible he could do that. And I mean, again, I'm going to hope that he gives out more information like this, but not hold my breath.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next question is about Wikipedia, and this is directed to John Kiriakou. They're asking about his entry on Wikipedia, and what is your assessment of that? And maybe others could chime in, because there is the allegation Wikipedia is tied with the intelligence agencies, and they use it to promote disinformation. That's maybe what this question is getting at.
Yeah, I think it's been well documented that the intelligence community abuses Wikipedia. There was an incident just a couple of years ago when dozens and dozens of edits, pro intelligence community edits, were made from computers whose ISPs traced back to the CIA. So this is an ongoing problem, and frankly, it should be illegal. It was illegal until Saint Barack Obama of Illinois became president and signed a national defense authorization bill that allowed the propagandization of the American people. Yeah, this is something that we should be worried about and fighting against. As to my own Wikipedia page, I'm actually embarrassed to tell you that I've never actually looked at my Wikipedia page. I probably should. I should probably hire some 18-year-old kid who understands how to do these things to change it to what I want to see. I'll actually write myself a note to do that. But in all seriousness, yeah, this is a big problem. I once worked for a guy who had a very long career in journalism, and we were talking about Wikipedia, and he said that when he was the editor of the Los Angeles Times, he told all of his reporters that if he ever caught them using Wikipedia, they would be fired on the spot. And that's probably a good policy. Now, I'll admit that every once in a while, if I Google something and a Wikipedia page pops up, I'll check it out. But I always, always, always go to the actual sourcing and look at the original sources. You can't believe Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's what I tell my students, because these days, I teach a part-time at a community college, and students, that's just like their knee jerk, trying to sign a term paper and they just go to Wikipedia. And, some of the historical topics are really very poorly covered. Like I've studied the Alger Hiss case, for instance, and their books that exonerate Hiss, and I think the evidence indicates that he was innocent. But the Wikipedia immediately says he's guilty, and people just assume he's guilty because of that entry. And that's just one example. So, okay, the next question, I guess, is for pretty much any of the panelists. The question is, do you think the Ukraine war will spill over into Transnistria and Moldova with Ukraine's suspension of its gas contract with Russia?
I'll jump in there. Volodymyr Zelensky appears intent on seeing how many things he can do wrong in what I think will be his last months in office. So today they tried to launch an attack on the Turk Stream pipeline, which runs from Russia through Turkey, carrying a lot of natural gas into Hungary. Viktor Orban was very quick in denouncing that as an attack, not just on Hungary, but as an attack on the European Union. Now, here's Zelensky, who's supposedly trying to curry favor with the Europeans, but so far he's managed now to fully alienate Orban of Hungary, Fico of Slovakia, the prime minister to be in Austria is also not a Zelensky fan. Ditto for the new prime minister in Croatia. So when it comes down to the ability of the West to control the narrative, they have no control. Russia holds all of the cards, or to use the phrase, holds the trump card. Trump doesn't hold the trump card. Trump is going to be compelled to be a spectator to this because what Russia wants is it's not just a cessation of the fighting in Ukraine, with Ukraine attacking Russian targets. They want to dismember the Ukrainian army. They want to dismember the Ukrainian government to eliminate any Nazi presence. And they want to end any possibility of any further NATO interference with Ukraine going forward. I think those are non-negotiable points for Israel, or I mean for Russia. And to that extent, the longer the war goes on, the more territory Russia's going to take, up to and including consolidating eventual control of Transnistria and taking Odessa back.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for your. Anyone else want to add any points or? Okay, well, yeah, I think that's very good analysis, and yeah, I think the loss of the narrative is also a common thread. I think we're seeing that all the disinformation promoted by the intelligence agencies, more and more are waking up to it, and I think that taps into some of the points, including what Ray was making, as far as the optimism, because if the public is no longer believing it, then at some point the government, whoever it is, has to be responsive to the public. Oh, go ahead, Ray. Yeah.
I'm unmuted. Just 2 points about being dissed by WikiLeaks, not WikiLeaks, but Wikipedia. I once looked at my page, just once, and I found out that, guess what? I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think that the Russians didn't hack into the DNC, and I've written and I've talked about that. I'm just a conspiracy theorist. I've been totally discredited. Well, I didn't know any of that. So I turned off Wikipedia, and like John, I don't look at it anymore. On the question of conspiracy theorists, now, when we were uncovering all this business about the fact that it wasn't the Russians that hacked those DNC emails, in some other way, most likely a thumb drive onto a computer in the DNC that was copied, put in someone's pocket, and taken over to WikiLeaks. Who was that? Who had access to DNC computers? Was there some other possibility? Without going any further into it, I would simply ask maybe Colleen, number one, do you think Kash Patel knows what happened to Seth Rich on the 10th of January 2006, not the 10th of January, 10th of July 2016? If he doesn't, do you think he can find out? And is that one reason why they dust off 100-year-old former directors of the CIA and the FBI like William Webster to say, oh, Kash Patel will be poison for our body politic? Is that why? And last but not least, as we all know, the Bureau has all kinds of dirt on 100 senators, okay? Now, is it within the Bureau's power to prevent Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel from being successfully confirmed now that they have been nominated?
All good questions. And, I just would think right now, I think the Strauchs and Comey, certainly. I'm not sure about Ray. I don't have a sense of whether he would play the Hoover and go to some of these senators in his last, Ray's only got a couple of days left too. I don't know. They have to think that perhaps it would get out. I'm not sure. And it's a little bit risky to do that at this point. One of these senators might rat them out. You never know. It's hard to say. I would think even Comey, when he did this, was walking on eggshells when he tried to play the Hoover. Anyway, that kind of certainly the dirt probably does exist on a lot of them. Obviously, this is the whole Epstein formula for gaining power and Hoover, Epstein, gaining power is getting that blackmailable dirt on people. But I don't know if it would be used right now. And going back to Kash Patel probably, when he gets into the FBI, if he's curious, he can probably find out a lot of things. He can read up and find out if he's not too busy doing other things. Whether he would actually be that curious to even try to find out what's past and see if there's anything that he could do about it. I don't know him that well. Like I said, I know he's made some good recommendations for reform if he was being sincere about it. Those were all good recommendations, but whether he would actually, if he finds out some information about the past and decides to declassify it, again, more power to him. I hope it happens. I hope he does declassify a lot of information. But again, don't hold your breath.
Right. Well, are there any other? Yeah, we are kind of running out of time, and it's getting late on the East Coast, so we may call it a wrap unless there are other points that people want to raise or questions people may have. Good. Well, again, I want to thank our guests for joining us. Yeah, the video will be available on YouTube, so you can send it to friends who may have missed tonight. And yeah, please do try and support us at Covert Action Magazine. And yeah, we'll see how things play out, and we may have a return of this group in 6 or 8 months, and we'll be able to see if our predictions were correct and where we stand at that time.
That was good. Thanks,
Yeah,
Jeremy.
I think let's
Thanks,
plan
Jeremy.
that for maybe for the summer, late, maybe early summer, we'll try and have a follow-up.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Terrific. Well, good night to everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, just ended the stream.